Hey y'all, this is Draft Dad. I wanted to quick chat about the state of the state in M21 Limited. I think over the past week and a half, everyone's been talking about aggro and tempo being the best route to take in this format, and I'm not saying that it isn't. But I do think there's a counter to this strategy that's getting underdrafted, and I think the meta could shift a little bit once folks recognize how to beat these aggro decks. So I wanted to make a quick video on how we're going to do that, what colors best do that, and what the philosophy and the theory is behind beating an aggro deck. All right, so let's jump in. All right, there's three major factors in beating aggro, and it kind of applies to all of Magic, but let's reiterate. So card quality, beating aggro. Aggro decks are going to have 1, 2, 3 drop creatures, maybe a couple 4 drop creatures, but they want to curve out and beat you down before you get a chance to respond and before your deck gets to really do what it's intended to do. And this is a general philosophy in Magic, but it's amplified with an aggro deck, right? There are cards in this format that allow you to combat that. Pestilent Haze, I think, is going to be skyrocketing up the pick order list now that these aggro decks have made their presence known, because this wipes their board. It sets you back to even, and then it allows you to get into the mid game where your deck can do what it wants to do and play bigger threats than your opponent, who's going to be behind now. Profitable trading. So most aggro creatures have abilities where they'll deal a couple extra points of damage, but they don't have any enter the battlefield effects. They don't have any leave the battlefield effects. Think things like Igneous Cur, which is just a mana sink, right? Or Chorister, which is another mana sink. If you have cards like Deathbloom Thallid, if you have cards like Llanowar Visionary, they're going to make your trades more profitable because the Deathbloom Thallid's leaving behind a 1/1. The Llanowar Visionary is cantripping. And this allows you to create incremental advantages over time and build your board presence up, right? Your opponent's losing a card, you're losing half a card. So slowly but surely, you're going to start to catch up. Doesn't matter unless you can survive to the mid game. Well, there's some great cards in this archetype that allow you to do that, and you can pick them up late. You can pick them up late in a pack. So think Portcullis Fine. You can pick this up, pick 13, 14 in a pack, and this will have your damage from the aggro deck, right? A lot of the aggro deck creatures are 2/2, 1/1, 2/1. This blocks them all. And the aggro decks have to have a trick to get past it. And if they use Sure Strike, sure, that's totally fine with you, because that Sure Strike isn't going to kill your Crypt Lurker, your 3/4 later in the game, and they're spending 2 mana to kill your 1-drop. And if you have 2 mana available, even better, you can sacrifice it in response and draw a card. That's almost a blowout for you. That sets the aggro player behind just by using their trick. So these cards will help you survive into the mid game. Portcullis Fine, Deathbloom Thallid here, and then Pestilent Haze. These will all do that and create profitable trades for you. So you might have realized Golgari tend to be the colors where you get into this type of deck. This is because the aggro deck is base white. There's a white-red version, white-blue, and a white-green version, and then you also have a blue-red spells deck, so that kind of leaves black out in the cold, and then green is only used in one of those decks. So Golgari is the default where we're going to try to make this strategy work. There's a lot of different ways to add value here. So Fungal Rebirth. Let's talk about Portcullis Fine again. They use the trick, they kill your Portcullis Fine, you have 3 mana available, or let's say they kill your Drowsing Pteranodon, your 2-drop, your 3/3. You can Fungal Rebirth, get it back in your hand, and create 2 1/1 green sapling tokens. This, they will kill a Chorister, they will force your opponent to discard a card if they have a Hallow Blade in play. You can double them up and kill an Igneous Cur, and your opponent will have to pump mana into that Cur just to trade it with both of them. So this can stop your opponent cold, and you get your Drowsing Pteranodon back. So this is a fantastic way to build value on the board, create profitable trades for your deck, and survive into the mid game. Another one, Skeleton Archer. This is an easy one here. It's 4 mana, which is a little bit expensive, but there's a lot of X1s in the aggro decks. Chorister, Hallow Blade, Vryn Wingmare, the blue 2/1 that jumps your creatures. So there's lots of targets for this Skeleton Archer. You can also play it after combat if you are swinging. If your opponent is in the Skies deck and they block a 2/2, your Land War Visionary with the rewarded battlements, you can use the Skeleton Archer to finish it off. So it's very versatile, a little bit expensive, but it's also a 3/3 body. Drowsing Pteranodon. So I wouldn't count on getting these late. I think most folks understand the value of a 2-drop 3/3, especially in this type of format. And then the Selesnya decks also really want this card, so they can put +1/+1 counters on it. But it's a fantastic defender, and it blanks a lot of the 1 and 2 drops in the format, and many 3 drops as well. Malefic Scythe. This is the key to making all your trades extra profitable. Every time you trade a creature, a sapling token, anything, the Malefic Scythe gets more and more dangerous, and eventually it's going to grow your creatures to a point where removal isn't going to affect them, and your 2 drops are going to be 6/6s, and so if they want to use a Face Fetters on that, by all means, you'll just move the Scythe over to the next creature and continue the beatdown. So Malefic Scythe, I think people know the power of this card, but since Black is being underdrafted, you might be able to get it a few picks later. And then Truffle Snout, another easy one. It's a versatile card. It's going to get you value, right? No matter what. If you need the 3/3, you're going to get a 3/3 for 3. Very good power and toughness ratio there. If you're getting beat down and you need the life, it'll give you the life. Against an aggro deck, it's also going to trade at a 2/2 level as well, right? And it can get you your life. It also combos well with Fungal Rebirth, right? Because it has an ETB effect, getting it back to get yourself 4 more life, very profitable there. Going to give you incremental card advantage. What are the weaknesses of this deck? It does have some. All right. This is a slower, more controlling, grindy deck. Teferi's Tutelage preys on this. The good news is, in best of 3, there's a lot of great sideboard options to shore up those weaknesses. But in best of 1, Teferi's Tutelage is going to cause you a lot of headaches. A turn 3 Tutelage, you might as well scoop in most games, right? Another one, blue-red spells. Having to use a Grasp of Darkness on a wizard token is big time feels bad. Okay, this Pestilent Haze deals great with this deck, but your removal, a lot of times, they don't care about their creatures, and they play Goblin Wizardry at the end of your turn, so they have it at instant speed. So this deck can cause problems as well. And then the Skies deck. Your opponents aren't going to trade at all, so you can't trade profitably. These creatures evade yours, but there's lots of great sideboard options for this one as well. In addition, the tempo boost when you're trying to play a 5 or a 6 drop later in the game, you're spending your whole turn and then they bounce it, can really put you behind on board and give them a huge tempo boost. So how do you sideboard against these? Well, you can get a 14th pick Return to Nature in best of 3 pools, right? That's not a problem to get that on the wheel. So you can get this card. It's going to deal with all the problematic enchantments from blue. Tutelage, obviously, but also Rousing Reed. It deals with Dub. If you're going up against a Boros deck that put Dub on their Hallow Blade. Deals with Capture Sphere, Shrine decks. Very versatile post board. Pestilent Haze. This is going to deal with the Skies deck. Almost all of their creatures are going to have only 2 toughness. I think there's just Gaggle Master. That's a 4/3. Other than that, it should wipe their board out. So Pestilent Haze deals with that deck incredibly well, as well as the blue-red spells deck, right? Because they're going to play Spellgorger Weird, which has 2 toughness if you can get to it early. Goblin Wizardry tokens, Mistral Singers. So this will wipe the board in most cases against that deck as well. And then versus Skies, you have Skyway Sniper. You can pick these up super late. It's a 1-drop. It pings the Vryn Wingmares. It pings Falconer Adept tokens. And then late game, it can start picking off their 2 toughness Mistral Singers and Roaming Ghost Lights. So this card as well does a lot of work. Picks off Sky Scanners, things like that. A lot of value from this card. There's also a couple higher profile sideboard options, right? Everyone's going to be picking Thrashing Brontodons, but I do think this is top 1, top 2 uncommons in green. So pick these up early, and they'll blank your Teferi's Tutelage. If you're in best of 1 and you can get a couple of these in your deck, you're going to be relatively well protected against that Tutelage deck. And then Snare Spinner. It's a common 2-drop. You're going to see them everywhere. You can still pick these up very late, 11th, 12th pick sometimes, but they do a great job at shutting down the Flyers deck. They trade with just about every Flyer, or they kill them, right? They kill Concordia Pegasus, they kill Mistral Singer, they're going to kill and trade with Roaming Ghostlight and Gale Swooper, right? So this card as well does a lot of work for a 2-drop, and it usually trades up in your Golgari deck. All right, so we know the Golgari deck. We know how to stop aggro, but what if you want to join the dark side and you want to be the aggro deck? Well, it depends on 3 things, right? Tricks. Your low drops have to be able to trade with their high drops. So your 2s and 3s got to be able to trade with their 4 and 5 mana cost creatures. Sure Strike is a great way to do that. It's going to make your Hallow Blade a 6/1 first strike, and it'll kill whatever they try to block with it. Block it with, and then you can continue the beatdown. Your opponent's further behind on board. You're putting the pressure on them. The other one is Tempo. So Pride Malkin. It gives a +1/+1 counter to your Pteranodon or your Hallow Blade, and it makes your creatures able to punch through extra damage or make your opponent have to trade poorly for your 2-drop, your 1-drop, your 3-drop with their 5-drop. Right? It also gives your creatures a form of evasion. So if they can't chump your Hallow Blade anymore or your Bazar's Acolyte, because the trample damage is going to come through and get them. And then reach, so you need a way to deal those last 5 points of damage. In most aggro decks, that's when your opponent's starting to come online and starting to get their mid-game going. Gale Swooper does a great job of jumping your creature, your Pteranodon, so you can get through that last 4 or 5 points of damage. So those are the 3 keys that you're going to look for in being aggro. I would not have more than 1 5-drop in an aggro deck and only a few 4-drops. Bazar's Acolytes, Gale Swoopers, that type of thing. So there's 3 different flavors of the white aggro deck, and then there's also the blue-red spells wizard token prowess deck. So Boros, the Alpine Houndmaster, of course, is an amazing card. Most aggro creatures don't provide this extra enters the battlefield value. This one does. It pulls 2 more creatures out of your library. It's a fine body at 2/2 for 2, and it gets +X/+O, where X is the number of attacking creatures. So it's going to get bigger with this Boros go wide strategy. You also have Daybreak Charger, another fantastic 2-drop in this deck. Your 1-drop Selfless Savior or your Chorister, which is a 1/1 lifelink for 1, is now going to be a 3/1 lifelinker. They can punch above their weight. They can kill a Pteranodon and trade off with it. So Daybreak Charger is going to be fantastic to push through those last bits of damage, make your opponent trade poorly, and give you that reach that you need. Shock. So Shock takes care of most of the early drops in the format. It also goes face if for whatever reason you need it to. It's going to kill all the Fetid Imp, right? It's going to kill that 1/2 for 2. That can be a problem if you're in the Selesnya or Boros deck. It will do that. If you're up against Selesnya, it kills or it can help take down a Conclave Mentor before it gets going. So Shock is a very versatile, powerful 1-drop. Seasoned Hallowblade, this is White's Mythic Uncommon. You put a dub on this, it's a 5/3 first strike, and it can be game over. The only way to stop these things is going to be Pestilent Haze and Grasp of Darkness. You can Capture Spirit, but no matter what, it's only a 2-drop, so even if you Capture Spirit, you're trading down, right? They're getting a mana advantage on you. But this card is a huge problem. Pick these first if you're going to be in the Boros deck. And lastly, Bolt Hound. So these decks curve out incredibly well. So if you drop a Chorister on turn 1, Daybreak Charger on 2, and then a Bolt Hound on 3, you're going to be attacking for 10 damage on turn 3. That's insane, right? Or 8 damage, I think, in that case. So Boros, I think, when it comes together right, is the most dangerous and fastest of these decks, but there's also Azorius. This is the Skies version. Depends on Watcher of the Spheres to make the Roaming Ghostlight cheaper, your Gale Swoopers cheaper, and then this is also a threat in the air because you're casting flying creatures constantly. If you have Falcon or Adept, that's also going to give this a +1/+1 every turn it attacks, right? These decks depend on warded battlements a lot. This is going to make the Azorius deck able to threaten and kill quickly. A lot of your creatures are a little bit underpowered because they have the advantage of flying. Warded Battlements helps to equalize that, and it also provides a good way to block on the ground to help you win races, right? Mistral Singer, for any tricks like Basri's Solidarity, this is going to grow Feat of Resistance. Your creatures are a little bit more fragile, vulnerable to shock, so this prowess trigger, if you have an Opt or something, is going to help it avoid some of that damage. Mistral Singer is integral in the Azorius deck. As well. Gale Swooper, this is just a 3-power flyer with Warded Battlements. It's a true threat. It gets 4 power for 4 mana in the air. Very dangerous card. And then, of course, Roaming Ghostlight. These are going to help if your opponent's trying to stabilize. They drop a reach creature like a Turret Ogre. It bounces that card back to their hand so you can swing over and get those last few points of damage in. It's best when you have a Watcher of the Spheres here, because you can drop this on turn 4, of course. At 5 mana, you don't want more than 2 or 3, but this is a very, very powerful card in the Azorius deck. All right, lastly, for the white aggro decks, we have Selesnya. I think this one can get out of control, and that's because of Conclave Mentor. This card is the Signpost uncommon for this color pairing, and it doubles the amount of +1/+1 counters on your creatures, essentially. So Basri's Acolyte, instead of giving you a +1/+1 counter on 2 creatures, it gives each of those creatures +2/+2, right? So you can see how insane that would be. A play pattern would be Conclave Mentor on 2, Truffle Snout on 3, Basri's Acolyte on 4 if you're curving out, and all of a sudden your creatures are totally out of control. Your Truffle Snout is a 6/6, your Conclave Mentor is a 4/4, and they're both attacking for 10 damage. So this card is insane with all of your +1/+1 counter synergies. Drowsing Pteranodon, casting this on 2 with a Pride Melkin on 3 means that you're attacking for 4 trample damage on turn 3. So this is an amazing card in the Selesnya deck as well. And then Feat of Resistance. Any tricks that give you +1/+1 counters are going to be more and more effective in this type of deck, especially with that Conclave Mentor out. And then lastly, special shout out to Invigorating Surge. So with a Conclave Mentor in play, this card will win a game out of nowhere, right? If you play this on turn 3 on your Conclave Mentor, I think it gets, it'll be a 7/7 by the end of it, right? Yeah, it'll be a 7/7 attacking on turn 3. So the Invigorating Surge is crazy if you have a Conclave Mentor in play. So this is a very dangerous deck. Their creatures grow out of control incredibly quickly. The best way to deal with this deck, I think, is to cast Pestilent Haze before their Conclave Mentor gets online and gets going. All right, lastly is the Wizard deck. This one's a little bit different. It depends on Goblin Wizardry. Usually you're going to need 3 or 4 of these to enable your Wizard tokens to win a game out of nowhere. What it does is it packs a bunch of cheap spells and prowess creatures, right? Frantic Inventory, Opt, Shock, those types of cards to grow your creatures with prowess, make them into threats on offense, and eventually win the game. So Riddle Form is another key component of this deck. It gives it reach. It provides a big body on turn 2, and you can activate it pretty much every turn. How these decks usually win the game is Burn Bright. So if you cast Burn Bright, when you have a Goblin Wizard token in play, it becomes a 4/2. If you have 4 tokens, they're all 4/2s. If you have a Mistral Singer in play, that's now a 5/3 flyer. So Burn Bright gets insane with evasive prowess creatures, Goblin Wizard tokens. That's how the Wizard deck wants to win. This one, I think, if it comes together, and these are all common cards here with the exception of Riddle Form, can be incredibly dangerous. People do value Goblin Wizardry, so it's tough to get 3 or 4 of them, and you have to wait until turn 5 to really get that critical attack in and deal a bunch of damage to your opponent. But when it works, and it's incredibly dangerous. All right, let me know what you think about being aggro and beating aggro. Thanks for your time, folks.